The moment I opened the door, the world seemed to pause. There, on my porch, stood Margaret Hensley, my mother-in-law, in a crisp navy blazer. Her lips freshly painted red. A leather clutch tucked under one arm like a weapon. Her eyes, sharp as ever, pinned me in place. "We're going to see the lawyer," she declared, brushing past me into the house as if she owned every inch of it. "I know about the house. The one Aunt Clara left you. Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice cut through the morning air, cold and commanding, leaving no room for pleasantries. I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. How did she know? I'd only learned about the inheritance last night. A bombshell dropped in a late call from a Charleston notary. I hadn't breathed a word to anyone, not even my daughter. "Sophie." My heart thudded as I followed Margaret into the kitchen, the familiar dread creeping up my spine like an old friend I'd never wanted. Margaret was already scanning the room, her gaze sweeping over my modest countertops like a general assessing a battlefield. "Still buying that bargain bin trash," she muttered, peeking into my fridge before letting it slam shut. "And Sophie, she's all bones. You're feeding her junk. Do you even know what a growing girl needs?" 7 years. 7 years of Margaret's visits. Her critiques disguised as concern. Her suggestions that hardened into orders. I'd never stopped her, convincing myself Sophie needed a grandmother. That I couldn't afford to carve out more emptiness after David, my husband, died. But lately, that reasoning felt like a flimsy excuse, fraying at the edges. Margaret sat at my kitchen table, smoothing her skirt banner with the precision of a woman who'd never doubted her place in the world. "Well," she snapped, her voice like a whip, "are we sitting here all day? Or are you going to put on something decent? The lawyer's expecting us at 10. I've cleared my morning." She pulled a small notebook from her purse, placing it on the table like a loaded gun. "I've made a list of what we need to ask: estate value, taxes, investment options. We'll meet a financial advisor after. This needs to be handled properly. Rachel, you can't treat this like pocket change." I blinked, a spark of defiance flickering in my chest. I glanced around my small kitchen, the dishes drying neatly on the rack, the morning light filtering through thin curtains, the cereal bowl Sophie had left in the sink before school. This was my life, not grand, but mine. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You're not equipped to manage this alone. I'll take care of it, for Sophie's sake." For Sophie's sake. Those words. Always those words. She didn't see my hands curl into fists beneath the table. She didn't sense the storm brewing behind my silence. For 7 years, I'd let Margaret dictate, organize, control. I'd told myself it was easier, safer. But last night, a letter from Clara Hensley, David's distant aunt, had shaken something loose inside me. After Sophie went to bed, the phone had rung. A calm, measured voice introduced itself as Mr. Theodore Langley, a notary in downtown Charleston. "Miss Clara Hensley named you the sole beneficiary in her will," he said. No preamble, no hesitation. I thought it was a mistake. Clara, a woman I'd met only a handful of times, at David's college graduation, our wedding, and once when she dropped by unannounced with a tiny silver locket for Sophie. Too young to wear it. I hadn't heard from her in years. I didn't know she'd been watching me from afar. I sat at the kitchen table after the call, still in my work clothes. The house quiet except for the hum of the fridge. The words didn't feel real. A townhouse in Charleston's historic district, a beach cottage on Sullivan's Island, and a substantial sum of money. I couldn't bring myself to ask how much. It felt wrong, like prying into a stranger's life. But then there was the letter. Handwritten, sealed in a creamy envelope with my name in Clara's elegant script, to Rachel. "With love from Clara." I opened it carefully, as if it might vanish. "Dear Rachel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't mourn me. I've lived a long, wild, beautiful life. I chose you to inherit what I have. Not out of pity, but because I see in you what I once saw in myself. You're stronger than you know. But more important than the money or the houses is this: don't let anyone make your choices. Even if they claim it's for your own good, especially then. You deserve a life that's yours." I read it once, twice, then cried for the first time in months. Clara, who hadn't seen me in over a decade, somehow knew me better than anyone. She saw my silence for what it was, not peace, but surrender. This morning, as Margaret sat in my kitchen, sipping tea and issuing commands, I felt the weight of Clara's letter, tucked safely in my nightstand. Margaret didn't ask how I felt or what I wanted. She assumed, as always, that her way was the only way. I stood at the sink, stirring 2 teaspoons of sugar into her tea, my hands steady but my chest tight. I looked at her, those calculating eyes, that too sweet smile, and for the first time in 7 years, I wasn't sure I wanted her guidance at all. Clara's words echoed in my mind. This is your life, Rachel. Start living it. The air in Charleston felt heavier that week, as if the city itself knew a storm was brewing. Rachel Whitaker stood at the edge of her kitchen, clutching a mug of coffee gone cold, her mind replaying Margaret Hensley's threat. I'll make sure social services hears about it. I'll tell them you're unfit. The words echoed like a gunshot, sharp and deliberate. Margaret, her mother-in-law, wasn't just meddling this time, she was waging war. Rachel had spent 7 years bending under Margaret's control. But Clara Hensley's letter, with its quiet, powerful words, had lit a fire in her. You deserve a life that's yours. Now, with an inheritance, a townhouse, a beach cottage, and $3.2 million, Rachel was done shrinking. Margaret didn't waste time. By Wednesday, Rachel got the call. This is Elena Carter from the Charleston Department of Family Services. A calm voice said, we've received a concern about your household. Can we schedule a visit? Rachel's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice steady. Of course. When works for you? They set a time for Friday. Rachel hung up, her hands trembling, and grabbed a notebook. She listed everything she'd need: pay stubs, Sophie's report cards, proof of a stable life. She wouldn't let Margaret's lies unravel her family. But Margaret wasn't done. That same afternoon, Rachel came home to find Sophie, her 15-year-old daughter, sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale. Grandma was here, Sophie whispered. She brought a man, said he was from church. But I think he was a lawyer. She asked me weird questions, like if you've been acting strange or spending money you don't have. I didn't say anything. Mom, I swear. Rachel pulled Sophie into a hug, her heart pounding. You did the right thing, sweetheart. Alone in the bathroom later, Rachel locked the door and let herself cry, not out of fear, but exhaustion. Margaret's love was a leash, and Rachel was tired of being pulled. The next morning, Rachel called Theodore Langley's office. I need to speak with someone about protecting my daughter and me, she said. The receptionist transferred her to Ian Caldwell, a lawyer with a voice like polished oak, calm, steady, unshakable. Rachel spilled everything: the inheritance, Margaret's threats, the call from social services. Ian listened, asking only a few sharp questions. This is more common than you'd think, he said. If your story checks out, and I believe it does, we can handle this. Get me any documents you have. We'll build a case. Rachel didn't sleep that night. She sat on her balcony, the Charleston breeze stirring the Spanish moss across the street, and thought of David, her late husband. His quiet strength had once anchored her, but Margaret's control had filled the void he left. Clara's letter, though, had reminded Rachel who she was. She pulled out Margaret's notebook, the one filled with financial plans and underlined orders, and tore out every page, crumpling them into the trash. Then, in her own handwriting, she started a new list. My plans: visit the townhouse alone, meet Clara's neighbors, decide about the cottage, talk to Sophie, honestly, find a lawyer. For the first time, the page felt like hers. Friday came too fast. Elena Carter arrived at 2 p.m., clipboard in hand, her eyes tired but kind. She sat with Sophie in the living room while Rachel made tea in the kitchen, straining to hear every word. Sophie spoke confidently about school, her dance team, their quiet dinners together. Elena's questions were gentle but thorough. When she stood to leave, she met Rachel's gaze. Your daughter seems grounded. I don't see anything concerning here. But Mrs. Hensley has been persistent. She's filed an addendum. claiming you're isolating Sophie out of resentment for your husband's death. Be prepared if this escalates. It did. Saturday morning, a man in a windbreaker knocked on Rachel's door. Rachel Whitaker? He asked, handing her a manila envelope. You've been served. Inside were 14 pages of legal venom. Margaret was contesting Clara's will, claiming Rachel had manipulated a vulnerable old woman to disinherit the family. She called herself the matriarch, with a rightful claim to protect the Hensley legacy. Rachel's blood ran cold, but she called Ian immediately. This is desperation, he said, almost amused. Her claims are emotional, not legal. We have Clara's letter and can get statements from her neighbors. She was lucid. Rachel. Margaret's got nothing. Rachel drove to the townhouse that afternoon. Her first time seeing it as its owner. The pale blue shutters and ivy-wrapped bricks felt like a promise. Inside, the high ceilings and worn wooden floors carried Clara's presence, warm, lived in, alive. In a desk drawer, Rachel found a folder with letters from Margaret to Clara, dripping with venom. One, dated 2 years before Clara's death. Read. You don't know what Rachel's really like. She's selfish, hiding behind that meek act. Don't let her use you. Clara had underlined the last line and written in firm ink. Maybe I'm the only one who sees her. Rachel's hands shook. This was proof. Proof Margaret had tried to poison Clara against her long before the will. Proof Clara hadn't listened. The probate hearing was set for Monday at Charleston County Court, a sandstone building heavy with history. Rachel arrived early, dressed in a simple navy dress. Her hair pulled back, her face bare. She didn't need to look powerful, she needed to look steady. Margaret arrived late, her pearl brooch gleaming, her daughter Cynthia trailing with a folder thick enough to bend her arm. They didn't look at Rachel. Sophie stayed home. No child should witness love weaponized in a courtroom. Ian was waiting outside. Stick to the truth, he said. Let them dig their own grave. Inside, the judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a clipped voice. Read the opening statements. Margaret's lawyer, Landon Pierce, spun a tale of concern. Rachel, a grieving widow, preyed on Clara's loneliness to secure the estate. Ian countered calmly. We'll prove Clara was of sound mind and that Mrs. Hensley has a history of intimidation. He presented Clara's letter, neighbor statements, and Margaret's own damning words. Rachel took the stand, her voice steady as she described her relationship with Clara. She invited us over every Thursday. She taught Sophie checkers, told us stories about Charleston's history, about her family. She wanted her home to be a place of healing. Margaret's lawyer scoffed. Poetic. Rachel didn't flinch. When Margaret testified, her voice was polished but brittle. Clara was vulnerable. Rachel played the victim to win her trust. The judge raised an eyebrow. Do you have evidence of coercion? Margaret faltered. I know her. Ian submitted Margaret's letters, and the room grew quiet as the judge read Clara's note. Maybe I'm the only one who sees her. The hearing ended with a shift in the air, like a storm breaking. Outside, Margaret approached Rachel, her face tired, not angry. You've made a terrible mistake, she said. Rachel tilted her head. No, I think I've stopped making them. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You've turned Sophie against me. Rachel smiled softly. You did that yourself. Margaret turned and walked away, her heels clicking like a retreat. 2 weeks later, the judge ruled in Rachel's favor, citing Clara's clear intent. Margaret didn't appeal. Rachel and Sophie moved into the townhouse, its creaky floors and hand-painted tiles a new beginning. Rachel quit her soul-draining job at the city permit office and opened a studio, a space for writing, photography, and dreams she hadn't yet named. Sophie thrived at her new school, joining the drama club and shining as a firefly in a Midsummer Night's Dream. One night, Margaret appeared at a school play, clutching a gift bag with a charm bracelet for Sophie. I just wanted to see her, she said, her voice softer, older. Rachel took the bag gently. I'll give it to her. Margaret hesitated. I'm not the villain you think. Rachel met her gaze. You're the woman who let fear wear the face of love. Sophie later tucked the bracelet in a drawer. Maybe later, she said, and Rachel let her choose. Spring came early to Charleston. Azaleas blooming, the air sweet with citrus. On their porch swing, Sophie asked, "Would Dad have liked this house?" Rachel closed her eyes, picturing David's quiet smile. "He'd love seeing us in it, safe. Free. Ourselves." Sophie leaned against her, and the house felt like home. Rachel had won more than a court case. She'd won her voice, her peace, her life.